I want to ask two questions before I read from the Bible. My first one is, how many of you have children? Quite a few. Okay, at one point, I'm sure some of you guys had problems with your children with disobedience. As everybody that had children or was a child once did. And you know, the kids that aren't really obedient, they don't like to listen to you, and they practically never listen to you, then on Mother's Day, they give you a thank you card. Saying, Mother, thank you for everything. And then, on the other hand, if there's a child that's always obedient and listening, and always doing what you ask for, and they give you a thank you card, there's a big difference, right? A lot of times we don't want the words of thank you, but we want to see the actions, we want to see the deeds. We want to see that the child is thankful. As it happens with friends, as it happens with family members, with anybody. Just words, usually, they don't always cut it. If we don't show with our actions, they don't really do anything. My second question is, who here ever sowed a field? We're all city folk here? Nobody had fields? Gardens, maybe? I think some you did, right? I know in our family, I know my grandparents, they had fields, they lived off the land. So they had to sow, they had to reap. The whole entire year was just labor and labor and labor. And when they tell me the stories, it wasn't easy. From sunrise to sundown, they were at the field, they were plowing, they were planting, they were making the field, pulling the weeds. It was work. You don't just sow and then come next year to find a crop. It doesn't work that way. And it's much harder than that. And why I bring that is because we're talking on the theme, or we have this Thanksgiving coming up. And many times for Thanksgiving we start being thankful to God with our words. We say, God, thank you for A, B, C, D, and all the way through Z. We have many things to be thankful for. But through our life, we forget to show it. We forget to show it with our deeds. And I want to read a parable. That's Matthew chapter 20. We'll start from the first verse. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And when he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle at the marketplace, and said to them, You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. So they went. Again he went out about the 6th and 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, Why have you been standing here idle all day? They said to him, Because no one hired us. He said to them, You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive. So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to the steward, Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning from the last to the first. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more. And they likewise received a denarius each. Here we see the parable where there is a vineyard, and the landowner needs somebody to work in the vineyard. So he goes to hire people, and he starts in the morning going all the way till the 11th hour. Because the 12th hour, that's when the day ends. So all of us, we know, whoever went to church, we've heard many sermons on this subject, on this topic, that being hired is when the Lord calls you. When God calls us into his vineyard, that's when we are saved. But when we are saved and we go to his vineyard, it doesn't say that he called them to stand around. They're standing around in the marketplace, idle. He didn't call them into the vineyard to stand around idle. He called them into the vineyard to work. To work until the evening come and until they receive the payment. And no matter when the people were hired, some were hired in the morning, some the 3rd, 6th, and 9th, and even the 11th hour, all of them worked till the evening came. All of them did something. Here, having Thanksgiving, to have a crop to harvest, we need to sow something. If we don't sow anything, we won't be able to harvest anything. But the problem is we do sow every single day, but it depends what we sow. Brother before me talked about sowing in the flesh or sowing in the spirit. If we sow in the flesh, we will reap from the flesh, which our flesh is going to be corrupt one day. I mean, everything's coming to an end. Our flesh, as youth, your guys' flesh, we're all going to soon find that we have our last day coming up. But if we sow into the spirit, that which is invisible, that which is eternal, we will reap from that which is eternal, from the spirit. So I want to call all of us today to work for God, to do something for the Lord. Because if you notice, he came, when did he pay his servants, people that he hired? When was it? Well, that's when he hired them. When did he pay them? at the end, right? He paid him at the 12th hour. So if you were hired, let's say the 3rd hour, and you work till the 6th hour, and you decide that's enough, I just want to get my pay, and you leave. Well, the payment doesn't come till the 12th hour. So for some of us that we were saved early on, and we worked for God, and we did so many things, and we have good memories, but at the 9th hour, let's say in our 50s, we decide that's enough. I think I'm done, I'll take a rest. Well, if we take a rest, if we're done, God won't pay us. We won't have the payment because He pays at the 12th hour. So nobody has an excuse. God doesn't have early termination. He doesn't have, He doesn't let us go on to leave or retirement. He doesn't have retirement. With God, retirement is when we go into heaven. While we're here on earth, we have to work. If we're not working, we don't get paid. If we don't work till the 12th hour, if we drop out any time before then, we don't get paid. For us, for youth, it's more understandable. We still have strength, we can work. We still maybe have desire. For older folks, sometimes they seem like they're done. They did their deed, and they're ready to go home. But I want to remind you guys a figure of the Bible, which was an inspiration for me, and especially preparing this sermon, he was just a great inspiration for me. I want to talk about Moses. Moses was born into Egypt, into a Hebrew family, but in Egypt. And he spent 40 years in Egypt learning the wisdom of Egypt and also discovering who he was. Because he was fed, or as a child, he was with his mom, and then he went into the hands of the Pharaoh's daughter to be with her. And 40 years he was in this state of, he's not Egyptian, he's not really Hebrew, he didn't know what he was. But he knew that his people were the Hebrew. And it says one day he went out to see how his people were doing, and he saw that an Egyptian was, I guess, causing conflict, having problems with the Hebrew. And knowing that he was a Hebrew, wanting to protect his people, he did what he thought was right. He thought he was doing what was correct. He was going to save the Hebrew. And so he ended the conflict by killing the Egyptian. And he buried him in the sand, it says, in the Bible. So at 40 years old, he started, as he thought, doing something for God. He started doing something for his people. But soon we find out he has to flee Egypt because he started doing it incorrectly. He started doing the job wrong. He wasn't supposed to do it that way. And then 40 more years, he's in the wilderness, in the desert, and he's tending sheep for a person that later becomes his father-in-law. And he's there for 40 years. Now, 40 plus 40, what does that give you? 80. Who is over 80 or here? Older than 80? We have 2, 3, 4. Let's say about 5 people to just round it off. Maybe someone didn't raise their hand. About 5 people. So at 80 years old, what happens to Moses? At 80 years old, God calls him to work. At 80 years old, he sees a burning bush. He goes there, and God commands him, you have to go and lead the people out of Egypt. So if some of us find the excuse, or try to have the excuse, that I'm too old to work for God, all we have to do is remember Moses. His ministry only started when he was 80. Granted, he lived till 120, but still, if we count that in, around 60, let's say 50, with our ages since we don't live as long, is where today we would start the ministry for God. And he worked till his last breath. He worked until he died up on the mountain. He led the Israelites. He led them out of Egypt. He led them through the wilderness. And Moses wasn't any different than us. He had his own problems. He had his own temptations. He had problems too. And many of us, when we work for God, we work for the Lord, and then a problem comes in our life, we tend to drop everything. Moses, he was a blessed man, but he had a great problem in his life too. One time, the Israelites they were acting up, just like some of our kids, or some of your kids, some of my siblings, start acting up so much that you lose self-control. And this happened to Moses as well. He lost self-control, and when he was supposed to speak to the mountain to give water, he hit it with a staff, and it gave water. And this angered God, because he just lost self-control. He did what he wasn't supposed to. So God told him, you won't enter the promised land. He told him right away that you will not enter. You maybe see it, but you won't enter. At this point, Moses had the full right to just let his hands down and said, God, I don't want to lead these people anymore because I'm not going to enter. What's the point? Sometimes we have hardships in our lives and we fall down. We don't want to get up anymore because we don't see the point anymore. Moses, although he knew he wouldn't enter into Canaan, he still put forth all his strength to lead them into the land, the promised land, although he knew he wasn't going to enter. And he did this unto his last day, unto his last breath. Another example is Joshua, one of his the commanders that was with him. Later, he led the people into the promised land. He also was, I believe, 80 years old when he said, I will get up and I will take this. There was a city on the mountain that God had promised him. And he said, I will get up and conquer. And he, at 80 years old, gathered an army. And as a commander, he went and conquered the land. This tells us that for God, it doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. Until the last hour, the 12th hour comes, we are supposed to labor for God. And how are we supposed to be thankful? Not just with words. We need to be thankful with our actions, with our deeds. If we're not thankful to God through our deeds, what we do, like I really like the poem that our sister read. If we don't bless other people with our deeds, they don't get blessed. God wants to use us. No matter how old we are, what situation we're in, you guys have a great power because you have much experience behind you and you can pray. The power of prayer is greater than anything else. Through prayer, you can do more than any minister can do with a bunch of money. Prayer has more power than that because God has all the money. He owns everything. He owns the earth. So you guys have the opportunity, especially in these times, when now you finally have some free time, you can pray. You can spend the time on your knees, maybe just in humbleness in front of God, for God to do His work. And God really cherishes that, and He counts it as gold when we pray to Him. So I want to call all of us to work till 12th hour, never to give up. Although it seems that we're done, it seems that our time is up, we worked all we can, but for God, He gave us the 12 hours. To some, 12 hours are 50, to some 12 hours are 60, 80, to some 100 years is a 12th hour. We don't know, but we should work until the 12th hour, and that touches all of us. Nobody's excluded from that because, like we said, God doesn't have retirement. We're retired when we go to heaven. I want to call everybody to work for God, to serve Him, and just continue loving Him and praying for all of us, and we'll be praying for you. Amen.